Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the most electrifying and heart-stopping dramas unfolding in Los Angeles. Today is a truly gripping day for soap opera fans, as the landscape of our favorite families is about to be altered forever. The glamorous world of high fashion has been entirely eclipsed by a terrifying medical emergency and a desperate, high-stakes international manhunt. The sterile, unforgiving hum of the hospital monitors has become the harrowing soundtrack to the Forrester family's darkest and most agonizing hour. What initially began as a concerning but manageable diagnosis of bruised ribs following a violent altercation at the Bikini Bar has catastrophically escalated into a desperate fight for survival. R.J. Forrester now lies in a medically induced coma, his condition officially upgraded to critical as unseen internal trauma from Will Spencer's devastating punch wreaks absolute havoc on his body. The vibrant, talented young designer is tethered to life support, leaving his loved ones drowning in a sea of unimaginable agony. This sudden, horrifying medical emergency has shattered the fragile peace of Los Angeles, transforming a bitter corporate rivalry into a matter of life and death. The sheer gravity of RJ's rapidly deteriorating health has sent shockwaves through the fashion empire, proving that the consequences of unchecked rage are far more lethal than anyone could have ever anticipated. For Ridge Forrester and Steffy Forrester Finnegan, the sorrow of watching RJ fight for his life has rapidly metastasized into a blinding, venomous fury. The knowledge that a Spencer is responsible for RJ's critical condition has pushed the Forrester patriarch and his daughter past the point of corporate diplomacy. In their grief-stricken eyes, Will Spencer is no longer just a hot-headed rival or a romantic obstacle. He has been unequivocally branded as a cold-blooded killer. Steffy, whose anti-Spencer sentiments have been simmering for months, now feels entirely vindicated in her hatred. She and Ridge view Will's sudden disappearance not as an act of fear, but as the calculated evasion of a remorseless criminal. The halls of Forrester Creations echo with their demands for absolute justice, as Ridge vows to utilize every ounce of his wealth and influence to see Will locked behind bars for the rest of his natural life. Across town, the reality of the situation has completely shattered Will Spencer's psyche. When the horrifying news of RJ's critical condition reached him, the young man was consumed by a paralyzing, suffocating wave of panic. He never intended to end a life. The punch was a reckless explosion of jealousy fueled by his complicated romance with Electra Forrester. But intentions do not matter when a man is bleeding out in an intensive care unit. Facing the terrifying prospect of being charged with attempted murder, or worse, manslaughter, should RJ succumb to his injuries, Will suffer a complete psychological collapse. The walls of Los Angeles began to close in on him, transforming the city he once sought to conquer into a sprawling, inescapable prison. In his absolute desperation, he turned to the only person who possesses the power, the resources, and the moral flexibility to make a nightmare disappear: his father. Enter Bill Spencer, a man whose entire existence is defined by his ruthless desire to protect his empire and his bloodline at any and all costs. $4 bill. The law is merely a suggestion, and a crisis is simply a problem waiting to be buried under a mountain of cash. Operating with terrifying efficiency, Bill orchestrated a clandestine midnight escape, utilizing his private Spencer Publications jet to smuggle his youngest son out of the country before the authorities could even draft an arrest warrant. Bill's destination of choice was a heavily guarded, isolated island, a remote paradise entirely cut off from the prying eyes of the world. Bill's misguided hope is that by stashing Will away in this luxurious fortress, he can wait out the storm, allowing the legal heat to cool down while he manipulates the narrative back in Los Angeles. However, this isolated island is far from a sanctuary. It is a gilded cage of psychological torment. Will is now entirely alone with his suffocating guilt, surrounded by the deceptive beauty of the ocean, while his mind replays the violent altercation on an endless, agonizing loop. He is a fugitive from justice, stripped of his identity and his freedom, living in constant terror of the moment the authorities finally breach his father's defenses. Bill may believe he has saved his son, but in reality, he has condemned Will to a purgatory of his own making, isolating him from the very people who could help him face the consequences of his actions and find some semblance of redemption. Back in Los Angeles, the sudden return of Wyatt Spencer has introduced a volatile new dynamic into this explosive situation. Wyatt was initially summoned back to the city by Bill to serve as a top executive in the ruthless expansion of the Logan fashion brand, expecting to engage in corporate warfare over diamonds and design rights. Instead, he has walked blindly into a sprawling criminal conspiracy. When Wyatt uncovers the horrifying truth about RJ's condition and his father's illegal orchestration of Will's escape, his reaction is one of profound, stomach-churning disgust. Wyatt has spent years trying to distance himself from the toxic, mafia-like tactics of Dollar Bill Spencer, and witnessing his father trample over basic human morality to cover up a violent crime is the ultimate betrayal of his trust. Wyatt's disillusionment with his father's actions serves as the catalyst for a massive ideological civil war within the Spencer family. He recognizes that Bill's twisted version of paternal protection is actually destroying Will's soul. Wyatt knows that running from the law will only solidify Will's guilt in the eyes of the public and the courts, permanently branding him as the monster the Forresters already believe him to be. Driven by a desperate need to save his younger brother from a lifetime of running, Wyatt makes a monumental decision. He completely rejects his father's criminal machinations and decides to take matters into his own hands, prioritizing moral integrity over blind, toxic family loyalty. To execute this dangerous mission, Wyatt turns to the only person who shares his unwavering moral compass, Liam Spencer. Liam, who has long been the ethical counterweight to Bill's ruthlessness, is equally horrified by the cover-up. The two brothers, setting aside any past differences, forge a clandestine alliance in the shadows of Spencer Publications. Their secret objective is incredibly perilous. They must use their intimate knowledge of Bill's resources, flight logs, and offshore properties to track down the exact location of the isolated island. They are not hunting Will to punish him, but to save him from himself. They intend to find their brother, break through Bill's security perimeter, and convince Will to return to Los Angeles to surrender to the authorities voluntarily. The threat of international law enforcement looms incredibly large over this entire operation. Wyatt and Liam are acutely aware that they are racing against a terrifying, ticking clock. If Interpol becomes officially involved and issues a global red notice for Will's arrest, the situation will spiral completely out of control. An international manhunt would strip Will of any opportunity to negotiate a surrender, guaranteeing a violent, highly publicized capture that would destroy his life forever. The brothers know that they must reach the island and reason with Will before the authorities piece together Bill's flight paths. The stakes have never been higher, as Wyatt and Liam risk their own freedom, potentially making themselves accessories after the fact, all in a desperate bid to salvage what is left of their brother's humanity. This gripping storyline masterfully highlights the profound internal rift tearing the Spencer family apart. On one side stands Bill Spencer, representing the old guard of immense wealth and unchecked privilege, a patriarch who believes that money can shield his bloodline from the consequences of their actions. On the other side stand Wyatt and Liam, representing a new generation that understands true redemption can only be achieved through accountability. The moral values of the Spencer brothers are being violently trampled under the weight of Bill's ambition to cover up the crime, creating a deeply emotional and philosophical battleground. Wyatt's heartbreak over his father's unyielding corruption is palpable, adding a rich layer of tragedy to his desperate quest to find his brother. Meanwhile, the collateral damage of this tragedy continues to devastate the women caught in the crossfire. Electra Forrester, who had just reconciled with Will, is now trapped in a waking nightmare, horrified by the realization that the man she loves is a violent fugitive. Her heart is entirely shattered, torn between her lingering affection for Will and her profound grief for her cousin RJ. Melissa Dillon, who witnessed the brutal punch, is consumed by a suffocating guilt, terrified of the secret she holds and the wrath of the Forrester family should they discover she knew of Will's aggression. The emotional fallout is spreading like a toxic contagion, infecting every relationship and alliance in the city. To fully understand the terrifying situation unfolding within the hospital, we must look back at the explosive catalyst that brought R.J. Forrester to this vulnerable state. The tension between the Forrester and Spencer factions reached a boiling point at the Bikini Bar, culminating in shocking physical violence. Will Spencer, consumed by a toxic mixture of jealousy and rage regarding Electra Forrester, delivered a brutal punch directly to RJ's abdomen. The sheer force of the blow left the young Forrester gasping for air, writhing in agony as Dr. Finn Finnegan rushed to his aid. Diagnosed with severely bruised ribs, RJ was immediately transported to the hospital for close observation. The ensuing chaos created a massive distraction, inadvertently leaving RJ isolated and dangerously unprotected in his recovery room. Taking full advantage of this familial chaos and the frantic energy typical of a busy medical facility, a dark threat has silently infiltrated the premises. Remy Price, the deeply disturbed individual responsible for the horrific deepfake scandal that traumatized Electra, has slithered his way into the intensive care unit. Remy is a predator who thrives in the shadows, an opportunistic stalker who uses the distraction of others to execute his sinister agendas. As the Forrester family focuses their venom on Will Spencer, they remain oblivious to the true monster walking past the nurse's station. The sterile, fluorescent-lit hallways provide the perfect camouflage for a man whose mind is consumed by dark, violent intentions. Remy moves with a chilling sense of purpose, his eyes locked on the room where the golden boy of Forrester Creations lies incapacitated. Remy Price's mind operates within a labyrinth of dark delusions and vindictive calculations. As he inches closer to RJ's hospital room, his twisted logic crystallizes into a horrifying master plan. He is acutely aware of the violent altercation at the Bikini Bar and knows that Will Spencer is facing the wrath of the Forrester family. In Remy's fractured psyche, this presents the ultimate opportunity for a devastating two-pronged strike. He believes that if RJ were to tragically succumb to his injuries while alone in that hospital bed, the authorities and the furious Forrester family would inevitably point their fingers at the man who put him there. Will Spencer would face a lengthy prison sentence for manslaughter or murder. By eliminating RJ, Remy plans to perfectly frame Will, effectively removing the primary obstacle standing between him and his ultimate, obsessive prize. That ultimate prize, of course, is Electra Forrester. Remy's obsession with the young woman has only festered and grown more dangerous since his initial exposure and arrest. He views Will Spencer as the arrogant usurper who stole Electra away and orchestrated his downfall. With Will locked away in a prison cell and RJ permanently removed from the equation, Remy envisions a scenario where Electra is left completely isolated, heartbroken, and vulnerable. In his sickeningly delusional romantic fantasy, Remy believes he can swoop in during her darkest hour of grief, manipulating his way back in her life without anyone left to stop him. The sheer depravity of this thought process highlights just how dangerous Remy has become. He has evolved into a man willing to commit cold-blooded murder to construct his twisted happily ever after. Inside the quiet confines of the hospital room, R.J. Forrester remains completely unaware of the deadly threat looming just outside his door. The young designer, usually so vibrant and full of life, is currently reduced to a state of extreme physical fragility. The bruised ribs make every breath a painful labor, and the pain medication flowing through his veins leaves him drowsy and defenseless. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor is the only sound breaking the silence, a stark reminder of his mortality. It is a tragic irony that a petty, ego-driven feud has placed the Forrester heir in a position where his life could be snuffed out by an entirely unrelated maniac. RJ is a sitting duck, stripped of his usual confidence and familial protection, entirely at the mercy of whoever walks through that hospital room door. The fragile last breath of the Forrester boy is hanging by a terrifyingly thin thread. Meanwhile, the hospital corridors are not entirely devoid of familiar faces. Melissa Dillon, carrying the heavy burden of her own complex emotions, has arrived at the intensive care unit. Dillon has been trapped in a psychological nightmare ever since she witnessed Will violently punch RJ at the bar. While she has been feigning happiness for Elektra's recent reconciliation with Will, she is secretly battling intense jealousy and genuine concern for her friend's safety. Dillon came to the hospital hoping to check on RJ's condition, driven by a desperate need to understand the full scope of the damage Will caused. She is a woman standing at a crossroads, torn between her lingering feelings for Will, her loyalty to Elektra, and her own desperate need for self-preservation. As Dillon navigates the quiet hallway near the intensive care unit, her heart suddenly plummets into her stomach. Through the glass partition, she accidentally catches sight of a lingering silhouette. The posture, the gait, the unmistakable aura of malice all register in Dillon's mind with terrifying clarity. It is Remy Price. The perverted criminal is lurking just steps away from RJ's vulnerable form. A wave of extreme panic washes over Dillon, paralyzing her in her tracks. Her breath catches in her throat, and a cold sweat breaks out across her forehead. She knows exactly what Remy is capable of. She knows the depths of his depravity and the violent obsession that drives him. Seeing him here, in this sterile environment of healing, is like watching a venomous snake slither into a nursery. The reality of the situation hits her with devastating force. Remy is here to do something unspeakable. The sight of Remy triggers a profound and agonizing internal conflict within Melissa Dillon. She is harboring a massive, explosive secret that could destroy her entire life in Los Angeles. Remy Price is her cousin. For weeks, Dillon has lived in absolute terror that this familial connection will be exposed. She knows that if the Forrester family discovers she is related to the monster who terrorized Elektra with deepfake videos, she will be instantly excommunicated. Her hard-won position at Forrester Creations, her promotion working alongside Daphne Rose Walton, and her fragile friendship with Elektra would all disintegrate. Dillon has gone to great lengths to keep Remy away, begging him to respect her wishes and leave town. Yet, here he is, proving